What if purpose isn't something you have to go out and find? What if purpose is actually hidden inside the things that brought you joy before the world told you who you should be? Before the pressure, before responsibility, before survival mode, before you started questioning whether you were good enough? What if your inner child already knew? Hello and welcome back to Dear Curious Soul. I'm your host, Duschanca. Last week was my birthday, and this year was my first sober birthday in longer than I can remember, probably over 30 years. And I found myself reflecting on past birthdays and all the different versions of me that have existed throughout those birthdays and my life. I looked through some of my old photos and found a photo of me on my sixth birthday. And it really struck a chord with me. And I keep thinking about this little girl, her dreams, her imagination, the things that made her light up. And I started thinking about all the wisdom that little girl, our inner child, holds. Because children naturally gravitate towards the things that fascinate them. They play, create, perform, explore, and dream without constantly worrying whether they're talented enough, productive enough, or successful enough. And somewhere along the line, many of us lose touch with that. We become practical, responsible, busy. We start choosing what feels safe over what feels alive. But what if reconnecting with your inner child could actually help you reconnect with yourself, to invite in more play, more passion, and perhaps even purpose? And that's what I want to explore in today's episode. Not inner child healing in a deep therapeutic sense, but reconnecting with the part of you that remembers what joy feels like. Because maybe evolving and growing isn't about becoming someone new. Maybe it's about returning to who you already were. There's actually a lot of psychology and neuroscience behind this idea. Research shows that children are naturally driven by what's called intrinsic motivation, which basically means they do things because they genuinely enjoy them, not because of money, achievement, status, or approval. Children will naturally move towards creativity, storytelling, movement, curiosity, imagination, performance, and exploration. And often those early interests reveal authentic parts of who we are. But as adults, we often disconnect from those things. Life happens. Maybe we were told certain dreams weren't realistic. Maybe we got hurt. Maybe we entered survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, the brain prioritizes safety, not creativity, curiosity, joy, or exploration. So sometimes people think that they've lost their purpose, but really, they've just lost connection with themselves. And I think that's why reconnecting with your inner child can feel so emotional, because you're reconnecting with the version of you that existed before so much conditioning took place. And something really interesting is that psychologists believe a huge amount of our subconscious programming happens before the age of 7. That's the beliefs we form, the way we see ourselves, the way we experience the world. It all happens there. But alongside those beliefs are also clues about what lights us up, what energizes us, what naturally excites us, who we were before we started editing ourselves. And just a side note about purpose, I don't believe we have just one purpose in life. How boring would that be? I believe our purpose evolves as we grow, change, heal, and experience life. Different things light us up in different seasons. And purpose doesn't have to be a career or some huge lifetime calling. For me, purpose is anything that makes me feel truly alive, anything that makes me feel aligned, connected, curious, inspired, passionate, or just deeply me. Sometimes purpose looks like creating. Sometimes it looks like helping others. Sometimes it looks like dancing, traveling, learning, loving, exploring, or simply just experiencing joy. I think purpose is less about what you do and more about how you fully feel connected to yourself and the universe while you're doing it. When I looked back at my own childhood, I could see those clues so clearly. A few years ago, when I was feeling very lost and purposeless, I sat down and made a list of all the things I loved doing as a child and all the things that I wanted to be. The list was as follows: marine biologist, a dancer, a TV presenter, a chef, an author, among many other things. I've actually spent years intentionally bringing those childhood desires into my adult life. I snorkel and scuba dive as a marine biologist would, and I've always taken dance classes. Right now, I'm obsessed with salsa. I write and I host this podcast. Not quite the author or TV presenter, but close enough for me. And I also have so many years to bring the rest of these desires into life. Those things that brought me joy then still bring me joy now. As a child, I absolutely loved performing. I would put on dance routines for my parents, for my siblings, my dogs, honestly, anyone that would watch. I loved getting dressed up in my mum's clothes, making myself feel glamorous, and putting on an entire show. And now, as an adult, I still love performing. I love getting dolled up. I love the outrageously cool costumes. I love stepping onto the dance floor. And I know without a doubt that little Duschanca would absolutely delight in those moments because she's still there. And I think that's such an important thing to remember. Your inner child never disappears. They simply get quieter if they're ignored or pushed aside. But when you reconnect with them, something incredible starts to happen. You feel more alive because purpose often isn't hidden inside logic. It's hidden inside aliveness, inside curiosity, inside joy, inside play. There's also fascinating research around play and the brain. Play activates dopamine pathways, creativity networks, imagination, emotional flexibility, and learning. Play is not childish. It's actually deeply important for emotional well-being and innovation. Dr. Stuart Brown, who researched the neuroscience of play and wrote the amazing book, Play: How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination, and Invigorates the Soul, found that a lack of play is linked to things like depression, rigidity, and emotional disconnection. And honestly, doesn't that make sense? Because somewhere along the way, many adults stopped playing completely. We stopped dancing. We stopped creating. We stopped imagining. And we stopped doing things simply because they delight us. Somehow everything became about productivity. But children don't live that way. Children follow fascination. And I think purpose often begins there, not in pressure, not in perfection, but in fascination. Here are some questions you could ask yourself to bring more play, passion, and purpose into your life. What did you love before you worried about whether you were good at it? What made you lose track of time? What did you naturally gravitate towards? What version of yourself got buried beneath responsibility, fear, or the need to survive? Because maybe the answers are still there. And reconnecting with your inner child isn't about becoming childish. It's about reconnecting with the most authentic parts of yourself, the parts that knew how to dream, imagine, express, create, play, feel joy freely. And there's healing in that too. Because when you allow yourself to reconnect with those parts now, you're also sending a message to your nervous system. It is safe to be me. And that can completely change the way you move through life. So maybe this week, instead of asking yourself, what should I do with my life? You could ask yourself, What made me feel alive before the world told me who I needed to be? What did you love as a child? What fascinated you? What version of yourself felt the most free? Because your inner child may hold pieces of the person you were always meant to be, not necessarily in a literal career sense, but in energy, passion, creativity, expression, and joy. Purpose isn't always something you find. Sometimes it's something you remember. As I enter the next year of my life, this new stage, this new version of me, I'm celebrating the little girl who got me here, the little girl who danced around the house in costumes, the little girl who dreamed big, the little girl who loved the ocean, performing, storytelling, and creativity. And honestly, I think she'd be pretty happy with who we became. So maybe this is your invitation to reconnect with the younger version of yourself too, to remember them, to honor them, and maybe even let them lead a little more often. Because the things that brought you joy as a child may still be pointing you towards yourself today. Thank you for listening with an open mind, a kind heart, and your dear, curious soul. And if you would like to support the podcast, please consider sharing this episode with someone who feels like the right person. It may be exactly what they need to hear at this moment on their path. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the whispers of your soul.